Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and I've got a fun one today. Last year I reviewed the Atari 50th collection from a company called Digital Eclipse. This is a retro game compilation that has a bunch of old Atari games, and of course we've seen those kinds of compilations many times over the last 20 or 30 years or so. But what was different about the Atari 50th is that it also was kind of like walking into a museum where they had a timeline of the Atari story and all the people that made Atari what it was. And it's something that you'll spend a lot of time with and perhaps spend more time learning about Atari than actually playing some of the awesome games that they included on that collection. And the company Digital Eclipse is back with another one that talks about the making of Karateka. I knew this game as Karateka as a kid. In fact, this is my original copy that's well over 30 years old. And this game was written by a developer named Jordan Mechner, and it pioneered quite a bit actually in the gaming world. I'm just going to boot it up here on this Apple IIe to see if it still works. I think it might. And what it basically entails is that you're this karate guy, this black belt, and you have to go and rescue a princess who has been captured by this evil guy. And the game was known for its animation, and I'll start up a game here. Let me just turn on the keyboard option. And it was known for its animation and its storyline and its music. And as you can see here, they're kind of setting the stage where we're going to be invading this temple here. And here's my little guy. Now, what's neat about this is that when he made the game, he actually rotoscoped an actual person doing karate. I think it was his brother. So the animation was kind of painstakingly put together based on real movements. And of course, this is something that the modern game industry does now all the time. And if the animation looks familiar to you, it's because this game was kind of a precursor to Prince of Persia, which took that rotoscoping approach to animation much further. And although, as you can see here, it doesn't run at a very fast frame rate, this was a very popular game on the Apple II. And I think it was popular not only because of its animation and its graphics, which were pretty good for the Apple II at the time, but also because it told a story, and there was kind of a desire to get further here. And although we're not going to play the whole game right now, I want you to try this compilation out for yourself a little bit later. You can get a feel for some of the cinematic elements of this game, where now that we've defeated the first guy, we have the head bad guy here and the bird that'll attack us later, sending out somebody else to get at us. And there's definitely a cinematic vibe here that wasn't something you experienced in video games before. And remember, at the time this game came out, console games were mostly the Atari, the Intellivision, the ColecoVision, and they didn't quite have the memory to store a game this extensive on cartridges. So it's kind of a neat game and at a neat time, and I think it's kind of a fun thing to spend some more time diving into. And one of the things that this game also had was a little Easter egg where if you flip the disc upside down, and we reboot the Apple II here, what you'll see is that the game actually will start up upside down. And this was just a thing that the developer thought would be fun because he wanted to see if tech support might get a few calls about it. And let's see if it comes in up. Yep, there it is. Everything is upside down completely. And that was just a little fun Easter egg that they baked into the disc here. So pretty cool stuff. So what I want to do now is take this Apple II off the desk, and let's take a look at the making of compilation that this video is about, because I think it's a great way to learn more about this game. I also think it's something that if you're interested in the video game industry as a whole, you might find very interesting too from a historical perspective. So let me get my modern computer out and take a look at the making of Karateka. So here we are on the home screen of the making of Karateka. Now this sells for $20. It's available on PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. It's also on Steam, GOG, and Epic on the PC side, and I think the version you buy in the Xbox store is cross-compatible with the Xbox and PC. Unfortunately, there is no physical version of this, at least at the time I'm recording this video. There was a physical version of the Atari compilation, which of course is still available, and this one would be great as a physical release, especially around the holidays, but I think the audience for this is a bit narrow because obviously Karateka is only going to appeal to men and women of a certain age who played this game a lot as children. And one of the surprises about this when you jump into it, first of all, is just how polished everything is. It feels a lot like that Atari compilation, but also the fact that Karateka, although it was known to be Jordan Mechner's first game, it was actually not his first game. He had a bunch of other attempts to try and get a game of his published by a major software publisher. And back in the early 80s, that was how things worked. It was almost like writing a book in that you wrote the game, you developed everything, you mailed it in kind of unsolicited to some of the major publishers of the time, like Broderbund, who ended up publishing Karateka. And a lot of times you get rejected. And what was really cool about this whole adventure for Jordan is that even as a young man, he documented everything. And he's got the original source code and the letters of rejection and all this stuff. And you can see these things as you're browsing through the timeline here. I don't want to do too much here to spoil this. I think it would be more fun for you to get this and explore this on your own. But what was cool is that he's even got his very first attempt at making a game here called Asteroid Blaster. And if I hit the Y button here, I can actually jump in and play the game. And this is because, again, Jordan kept everything. And he actually has a bunch of journals that he published about the making of Karateka, about, I think is another one he's got about the making of Prince of Persia. And he felt it was really important to document this stuff. And that really paid off here. So as you can see here, this is like an Asteroids clone for the Apple II. It runs pretty slow here, as you can see, but still for a young programmer who's just kind of figuring this stuff out on his own, it was pretty impressive for the time. And he then tried to create a game that would get published by Broderbund, and he called the game Deathbounce. And there's a bunch of revisions of Deathbounce, and after each revision, there are letters that came in from Broderbund rejecting it and making suggestions for making it better. And this was kind of fun to go through because it shows you that if you want to be successful, you've got to deal with rejection, and rather than blaming everyone for your failure, he went back and made the game better and better in an attempt to get it to a point that it would meet their level of quality. Now, in addition to seeing some of these older games and the revisions and all the documentation that's associated with them, there's also a lot of video footage that they shot exclusively for the making of compilation here. And so they have some pieces about the animation process. The stuff that I enjoyed the most was Jordan and his father talking about the making of this game and some of the other ones. His father was a music professor, so his father actually composed the music that was in the game, and Jordan, of course, was the creator, and Jordan's there on the left. And it's just kind of fun just to see how a career kind of began in childhood and turned into what he's done now for his entire life, which is, again, really cool and I think kind of inspiring. And even today, where things are harder to kind of be noticed in, it's still possible to do something like this. And that's what I enjoyed about walking my way through this. Now, there's a lot more to this, and again, I think it's best to go and pick it up for yourself to see it all, but this gives you an idea as to the amount of love that went into honoring this legendary video game. And of course, it was made possible by the fact that Jordan has so much documentation to go along with it. Now, just like the Atari compilation, they do have a section where you can jump into just playing the games outright. So they do have, of course, the original Apple II version that was released in December of 1984. There is an Easter egg where you can flip the disc over like I demonstrated earlier. And they also have other ports of the game too, like the Commodore and the Atari 8-bit. So if we go over to the Commodore version here, you can see how kids with a Commodore computer experience this game, because most kids had one or the other, right? So you didn't have the ability to see how perhaps the game would work on other platforms. So here's the Commodore version that runs in emulation and performs pretty much the way the original did. I can then jump out of here and go play the Atari 8-bit one as well. So pretty cool to kind of experience the game perhaps the way that kids who had Commodores or Atari 8-bit computers experienced the game. And the emulation, like it was on the Atari compilation, is really good. You've got simulated scan lines here, a simulated CRT effect. It all looks great, and the original sounds are there, of course, too. So good stuff, and you also have the ability to do save states and adjust some of the controls and the filters and all of that. So you can get everything tweaked just the way you want. Now, in addition to the shipping version of the game that came out in December of '84, they also have a few prototypes that you can play with. And if you're someone who's very familiar with this game, having played it now for close to 40 years, these prototypes are kind of fun because it's the same game, but it's not the same. So here is the original prototype that Jordan submitted to Broderbund back in the spring of '84. The music isn't the same. The gameplay is a little different. As you can see, the life meter there at the bottom of the screen looks different. And what was also interesting is that the guy doesn't climb up onto the ledge here automatically like he does in the shipping version. So initially he just kind of stands there waiting for you to do something. So yeah, a lot of differences here that maybe are subtle for most, but I think for some of us are going to be quite apparent. And it might be fun to kind of play through the game here in its original prototype. And then, of course, you can look at the progression of the game as Broderbund took a look at that, made some suggestions, and then there were additional prototypes after the fact. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Jordan was working on a game prior to Karateka called Deathbounce that had gone through a lot of iterations with Broderbund in an attempt to make the game something that they thought was sellable. And of course, you can play all the different versions of that game here. But what's really cool is that on this compilation, the developers, Digital Eclipse, actually created a modern version of Deathbounce that's actually a lot of fun. They fixed all the problems with the game. It obviously is running with the advantage of modern hardware here, but as you can see, they kind of left a lot of the retro elements here intact. And what Jordan had added to the game after Broderbund's suggestion was trying to develop some degree of being able to demonstrate progression throughout the game. So they had this space train concept where you have to take your ship here and attempt to find your way to the front of the train to get rid of all the bad guys. And what's neat about what they did with this game is they kind of turned it into a twin sticker. So you can shoot with the right stick here and use your thrusters with the left stick. So really cool stuff, and actually a lot of fun to play. There's not much to the game, kind of like the original wasn't much to it, but in the scope of the 80s arcade titles that you might play on a computer, this certainly holds up, I think, quite well and plays awesome on modern platforms. And you can see that these guys are more than just documentarians, they're actually really good coders. And the biggest thing here is that they actually made a new version of Karateka. Not that the original needed to be updated, but man, did they do a great job on this. So there was like kind of a modern interpretation of Karateka done a number of years ago, but I think it tried too hard. It tried to be a more modern game. This one simply just updates the graphics and smooths out the animation and controls here. And I'll let this play through here for a second. And of course, they enhanced the music. But wow, they did a great job with this. Look how great this looks. And look how smooth the animation is. But it still looks and plays true to the original here. So I was really impressed with this. I haven't played through all of it just yet, but look how amazing this is. So this is the real bonus here. And I think this is worth the 20 bucks on its own to get a modern version of Karateka that looks and plays a lot like the original does. So cool stuff. And again, one of the things that you'll find here on this making of compilation. So that is the making of Karateka. I purposely have not shown you all that much because there's so much to explore and discover here. And if you were a kid in the 80s that loved computer games, you likely loved this game. And I think you're going to learn a lot about game development, but also what it took to make this game on very, very limited hardware. And again, just going into how they did the animation and the music and all that took place here, and the fact that it was really written by one person along with some help from his family, I think really gives you a new appreciation for what it took to deliver such a quality title. And of course, the modern interpretations of Jordan's two games there are also a ton of fun to play. And my hope is that this will sell enough to convince Digital Eclipse to keep doing this sort of stuff. They were recently acquired by Atari, so I'm sure we'll see some of their work going into old Atari games, but there's a lot more out there, and I was really glad that they spent the time and effort to make such an awesome tribute to such an awesome game. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Budley, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Steve Green, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.